Hello and welcome to Mandatory Redistribution Party. My name is Jack Lewis Evans.
And my name is Sean Morley.
Look, Sean, a horse!
That's a cow.
What's it eating?
Cow.
This episode is about the countryside. What is the countryside? Where is it and why?
We'll be talking about how our pastoral dreams of green and pleasant lands obscures rural poverty, biodiversity destroying farming practices, and arcane land ownership laws.
Please help the Mando's hay bale keep rolling down the hill by sharing this episode on social media.
And if you want to support your local podcast farmer, you can pop a couple of coins in the trust box at patreon.com/mandatory redistribution party. In return, you'll get access to a bumper crop of extra content and bonus mini episodes.
Look, Sean, a rabbit.
That's a cow.
It's burrowing.
Okay, maybe I was wrong.
Look, a farmer's coming to say hello. Hello, farmer. We like your field.
That's a cow.
The British countryside is strange, isn't it? Would you agree?
Bizarre, otherworldly. You've gone back in time.
I think especially North Wales, which I had the mix of, I'm in the countryside and I'm also in these like grim seaside towns. Don't realise how weird. I mean, I think I knew it was weird when I was in it, but then leaving, meeting lots of other people. I almost said normal people then, but maybe they are normal. What is normal?
There is a feeling that once you've started living in a city people are normal. And it's not that people outside the city are abnormal. It's just that it feels a bit easier to meet someone that you cannot have a conversation with. And that is taking into account that the high level of mental illness on the street is quite high in cities. It's just not taken into account. Something about rural weirdness is scary in a folk horror way, whereas mental illness on the street is just scary in a systemic failure of services kind of way.
Yeah. We don't have the sort of wilderness in England and Wales that you do in America, or even Scotland kind of gets close to it. There are big gaps of very unpopulated areas up there.
Yeah, how well could you permanently hide? The thing that has always fascinated, if you go back to like the Arthurian legends, there's so many tales of like, oh, we just found this wizard and he lives in the woods.
Yeah.
I think the days in which you can live in the woods without having someone in like a beige jacket point a grouse rifle at you have been numbered for over 100 years.
It's difficult to set up a hovel, isn't it?
I lived in the countryside and I always wanted to go day drinking, right? With my friends, we wanted to underage drink somewhere on the weekend, but we didn't want any adults moving us on, causing a fuss. We just wanted to try and get some spirits and mixers and hide somewhere.
This is very familiar.
And you've got all of the countryside, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, where can you do it where no one will come? And that became like the puzzle of like the entire time I was doing my AS levels. We had a few good places. So the quarry, that was a good one. And that could, we had to stop doing that because it unsettled the townspeople. I say it unsettled the townspeople, we unsettled the townspeople. Oh, so you're still being perceived, right? So it's not perfect.
Yes, but to an extent we were enjoying being perceived because there was a lot of rusted corrugated iron up there and you've got a bit of a buzz on from your white lightning and then you're throwing gravel at the corrugated iron and it's making big loud noises that are echoing around the quarry and then echoing into the town. I mean, it became, I think the obvious answer is there's some silly lads up there doing silly lad things, but there was talk of a sort of entity living in the quarry.
Yes, the beast of the quarry.
Yeah.
You brought the big cat myths to your own front door.
A big cat that likes percussion.
But links on a drum kit.
But that was good. That was good because the only two ways to get into that were through a sort of horrible gorse you could get in through the back if you're willing to be horribly spiked. The other way was to go through two gates with like no entry and danger signs on.
That's always fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there ever a sign that makes you turn back? For me, it's the big electricity one. Anything else, I disregard. Once I see a big lightning bolt going into, there's a guy going, big lightning bolt. I'm like, oh boy, bit rich for my blood. And I know I'm like, I would be that guy as well. Like, I would. But there's always someone who's like, nah, it's just propaganda, it's just lies.
Yeah,
Lightning's not that thick.
I will respect a warning sign a lot more in the city than I would as a youth in the countryside because I would just see no entry and be like, oh great, this means there'll be fewer people this way. That's what that sign meant. The other place we would go, there was like a river, well, more a stream. Well, I don't know, fair whack. At full pelt, it's like 3 meters wide.
Yeah,
it's in the realms river, and it's above the water. This waterfall, and then you've got barbed wire fence, a really old like rusty grim barbed wire fence that like goes into trees that have like grown over the fence posts, and then real horrible like nettles overgrowth. But if you went through that, were willing to go through the nettle danger about 20 meters, you would find an abandoned Roman lead mine. So a series of sort of crazy interconnected caves, which again, great for making horrifying sounds come out of.
Yeah.
And once again, just inexplicably, big bits of corrugated iron. Like, who swears it? It's not the Romans. Someone was doing something there recently. Both of them felt like the commons.
Yeah.
It must have been owned by someone, but it felt like you shouldn't be there, but it also felt like, yeah, this is our secret place.
What I like about the countryside is firstly, there's enough open expanse and weird little bits. You feel like you can find stuff, and there's old bits of a history that could be around every corner. But whenever you find anything, there's always like a crushed up couple of cans of Stella Artois. It's always been someone else's weird spot. You can crawl into the sewers and go like 500 kilometres down a pipe that was never used. It just goes into the North Sea. And at the end, you'd find like someone's diary, Stella Artois, an old Walkman. Someone's been in there to be sad.
It would smell somehow faintly still of weed.
You know, someone's had a really shit little party in there. Like they weren't even having fun.
I like so much of my teenage antics were like, it went dark and then I was actually freezing. Like we're having a good time, but we can't go in anyone's house. So we're outside, it's night and it's freezing, but we're in a cave, we're in a quarry, we're on the beach, we're having a good time.
Where we ended up, we tried for a while.
Yeah.
We liked going to farmers' lands where they grew very tall crops.
Oh, great stuff.
The taller the crop,
the better.
You just hide behind it, you sit behind it. There was a farmer who like every other summer did rapeseed. That grows like over 2 meters tall.
Yeah.
Easy peasy, you sit down there. But he got wise to it, got very angry. We kept trying to like stock up and hide food in there. We kept trying to like cover up. We kept thinking, we got leftovers, let's leave them for next time. And obviously like foxes went mental, then he went mental that the foxes were there. We tried to make some like little wooden furniture as well. So eventually we're like, he was just too vigilant. Our place that we ended up settling on was a disused World War II pillbox on the exterior perimeter of a BAE Systems factory on the Humber estuary.
That's countryside. That was countryside.
That was very, very good. You only meet people if they were trying to walk around the perimeter of the country. So you would occasionally meet someone and they were like, oh yeah, we're doing the perimeter walk. I'm like, what, walk the whole of the island of Britain? Yeah, I'm knackered. You'd meet very strange people.
How much days off have they got off work?
I think they're people who, they wouldn't understand the question.
Right.
They're like little hobbits. They only live to build up further callus.
We have to get the ring to Mordor.
Once I do an entire loop of the island, it will vanish.
Yeah, they're just selecting it. Yeah, I'm a cursor. Invert selection. Oh no. Invert selection delete. Oh no.
Oh dear. Good thing the Isle of Wight's still here.
Yeah. I had the advantage of quite a few of my mates were, my mates weren't farmers. They were the sons of farmers. That meant I knew the farmers, and I knew the farmers who would shoot you or threaten to shoot you, and the farmers who would not. Boy, oh boy, they don't like you being there. Some of them are fully not arsed as long as you're not like a total tool. I
read up on the laws of wild camping at different parts of the UK, and it's technically illegal everywhere in England. I think Wales as well. Scotland has a more lax policy on it because there are just parts of the Highlands which are like, go for your life, do what you want.
Yeah.
But I was reading it about Ireland and different parts of Wales, and it moved on to like everything's sort of owned by someone. So here are our tips for befriending a farmer. It'll be like different drinks that are popular in different regions.
Yeah.
Here, if you give them a bottle of this, they'll like you. And it always assumed that all of them would drink alcohol, and that a bottle or two would get you a couple of nights on the farm. I like that.
It's 95% correct. I mean, a lot of farmers are in a position economically fucked, and they're kind of getting some subsidy to keep some sheep on a hill that's not remotely profitable in any way, but their families had that farm for 600 years, so they're still doing it. But they don't need that bit of the field that 2 meter by 1 meters of your tent is going to take up for one night. They probably won't even notice it. Let's be honest. A lot of tents they sell are green, and they're green for a reason.
Camouflage.
Yeah.
Stealth. Spying.
But the other thing of the growing up on farms stuff is, but this became my baseline, and then realising this was strange later. I learned to drive at a stupidly young age. I definitely had attempted to drive a car when I was too physically small to drive a car. Me and my mate Tommy had an autograss car, which was a Volkswagen Polo. And I remember like smashing all the windows of it to replace it with chicken wire.
Nice.
And then we were like driving that around fields, racing other people in similar fucked cars years before we could legally drive on a road, which is...
That's a very countryside tradition. That like the highways and the roads you got your laws for, they don't apply to me and my mates' fields. We will
the law
move
doesn't exist in the field.
anything around with any of us inside it at any speed.
Yeah, well, exactly. Combine harvester. I mean, I was never allowed to operate a combine harvester, but I've been in the cab of a combine harvester quite a lot. A ploughing tractor. The fuck thing about tractors is, for the non-countryside listeners, I'm sure you've been annoyed by them going slow, etc. When you're in it, boy oh boy, you don't want to be going slow, but the faster you go, they've got no suspension. So they've got suspension in the chair, so the chair's bouncing up and down. I'm sure if you're aware of operating a vehicle, you've got to use like pedals. So the idea of having a bouncy chair and like pedals to operate is a bonkers combo, and that's just an industrial piece of machinery that's widely used. It's fucked. But if you're in the cab with someone, you are just sat on like this, like basically a windowsill. You've got no bounciness, and you are having a bad time. I could have stayed in Wales and gone hardcore farming. There's a number of reasons I didn't. The sheer discomfort. Well, I'm waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. every day.
As an intensely nervous child, I was more put on dangerous vehicles because it was assumed, even though I showed no interest in it and I was just scared, I'm sure I was like in primary school again, I was just like, come with me on this motorcycle then and we'll just see how steep a hill we can go at maximum speed. No,
and I want to clarify, I'm not
terrified.
Brave. I'm probably quite close to you. I eventually, when I built the confidence to operate vehicles, I was constantly terrified. Being on the back of a bike, terrifying. Being on the back of a tractor, terrifying. But you couldn't go, no, I'm actually scared.
I'm scared. I'm scared. What's the age at where you're allowed to be scared? What's the youngest you can be where it's socially acceptable to go, no, that scares me?
I think I'd have to have gone to uni to be able to go, no, I don't want to do that. I think
it's maybe
any
just
younger
pure
than
environment,
that,
right?
I would just purely kowtow. Peer pressure has a powerful effect on my behaviour.
Yeah. This is why I can never understand people who continue to live in the place they were raised. Don't you want to say I'm scared sometimes? I revel in that freedom on an almost daily basis.
Yeah, I would prefer not to. That scares me.
Yeah. That scares me is I would prefer not to.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
I got made to do attempt wheelies on my bike way too much, and every time just really hurt myself. There was no like learning curve.
It's too difficult.
Yeah.
No one wants to do the intermediary steps before you do the advanced things. You just do the advanced thing and hurt yourself over and over again. Learning at an appropriate pace is also as like verboten as just saying I'm scared.
Bikes, that's the countryside thing of just going through the woods, walking through the woods for half an hour, and then suddenly you're in an elaborate sort of bike track that someone's built, loads of jumps and all kinds of crazy shit.
That's the flip side of looking for secret places, right? Sometimes you look for a secret place, it's perfect, it's someone else's secret place. And then it comes down to who's older, who's scarier. And then sometimes, so I lived in Birmingham until I suddenly lived in the middle of countryside. What counted as like a scary guy? To me,
very different.
Was like, this isn't a scary guy. I consider myself scarier than this guy. To me, a scary guy is someone who's willing to kill me over what's in my pockets. Because that's what counts as scary. But just living in this bit of the countryside, people are like, oh, it's scary. It's just someone who sells weed. And everyone's terrified of them. But it means if they're on the swings, and they're like, I got the swings, I could be like, can I ever go on the swings as well? Me and my friends want to go on the swings. I know they're not going to do anything. They've never had to learn. They've never had to learn to be an absolute nutcase because it's too calm in this bit of the countryside.
No, see, I had a combination of countryside, but with in orbit of real. So the guy who sold weed,
so you've got urban poverty
did have a machete
spilling into the woods.
Yeah. They're in the woods. So the people,
Birmingham with a full forest.
Yeah,
that's actually quite scary.
Yeah. That was quite stressful. I do remember going to the caves once, the Roman lead mine. One of my mates was just slightly in front of us, and then he just turned around and was like, "No, we have to go. We have to go." Like, why? He just said, "There's some bad lads there." But we were in many ways bad lads, but they were badder lads.
Oh yeah, when you exist, that ability to know exactly where you are in this pecking order hierarchy.
Yeah.
And people outside it don't understand. They don't understand how everyone seems to know.
Yeah.
You just know. It's like it's like you've got an augmented reality, like Dragon Ball Z strength calculator, and you add up all these lads, you look at your lads, and you're like, no.
Yeah, and that's where you can say,
a miracle.
That's where you can say, I'm scared.
I am scared.
Yeah, I'm scared. Yes, we're all
these
scared.
Lads are bad.
Let's leave, yeah.
Yeah.
They're badder than us. Saw a horse wanking once on a farm.
I just didn't know a horse could wank. Oh, was it doing like frottage?
What, frottage? What's that?
Is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know what that word means.
I think it's the fancy word for dry humping. I think it's when you might... I think dry humping is just when you rub your member along something or someone. And then frottage might be like between the legs or thighs of another. So it's not sexual, it's not penetrative.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So you've hooked into the issue that how can a horse wank? It's got hooves. It can't be gripping anything. So what the horse wank is it'll do... the sort of Kegel-related maneuver where you can sort of move a penis.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it's doing
Never
that.
did a lot for me, personally.
It's whacking it against its horse belly.
And can that bring it to climax?
I've not seen that.
Oh, it's just torturing itself.
It's horse edging.
Even edging, you think at the end I could just stop edging and come.
I've never seen it. My mate claimed he'd seen one of them come. And I'm like, fucking hell, mate, how long were you watching it? We were watching a horse wank to see it to come, and then it became the whole thing of like, well, no, I was walking past it, and then it came. I was like, what, did you make it come? Did your appearance make a horse come? How do you feel about that?
I don't think it would bother me.
Well, I don't think it would bother you. I'm not saying it would be bad.
I think it could just be spooked. I mean, I've never had this happen, but I presumably
come from being spooked.
I think a frighten at the right time can raise your blood pressure, and then that might just...
Yeah, if a horse is edging for 35 minutes and then gets spooked by a sudden appearance of a human, its immediate reaction is just come.
I think, again, any shock to the system at the right moment can just have these profound effects, especially if you're trying to hold your breathing and your mindset and exactly, it's like you're trying to balance this spirit measure in your mind and some guy wandering down the field. Yeah. The whole house of cards comes tumbling down.
They do.
And you come.
The horses are wanking. Other fuck stuff's happened to me on a farm. I nearly drowned in like a sort of slurry lagoon.
What exactly is slurry?
Liquid shit.
Okay.
It's sort of slightly watered down. If you saw slurry, you would probably go, "That's diarrhea," and in many ways it is. But it's not like they're giving animals diarrhea in order to collect diarrhea. It's probably regular shit that is then mixed with water to make it runny so that it can be used to fertilize plants or whatever.
Right, so it's a wet form of manure. It's
wet manure, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
just like reeking. this transition from cum to poo in this conversation.
And then it's the horrors of farming, right? Because I think everyone has like an idyllic of like, ooh, nature. No, it's fucked. There's weird stuff going on with cum and shit.
When Werner Herzog he filmed one of his films in the rainforest, and he describes it like it was the birthplace of his kind of stoic German nihilism, that he just saw death and decay and everything was locked in this eternal battle, and he realized that life was suffering. I think a trip to a farm can do that for you. You don't need to go to the rainforest. I think you can just see that everything's coming and pooing all the time. You're like, this isn't like an eternal struggle against entropy. This just fucking stinks.
Slurry, like it was properly horrible. It's like a meme now of like, I didn't encounter quicksand in my life as much as my childhood taught me to. Fucking slurry is very quicksandy. Like I've lived sinking into a thing it's got a lot of purchase on. It's got a lot of suction because it's thick. It's like custard thick, right? Fell into it in a bit of the farm. Me and my mate shouldn't have been in, and then he pulled me out by my head because my arms went in. My arms went in easy, but then they were like stuck. I couldn't get my arms out.
Because once you're glooped in, there's nothing to push against, right? Pushing is just submerging.
Yeah. It's fucked. Stank of shit. My mate Tommy's mum hosed me down with quite a powerful hose pipe, shouting at me. Obviously, because I could have died, so probably quite a stressful thing to.
And a key question is, what led to you going into the slurry?
Fell. Didn't.
And why were you near the lip of some kind of slurry pot, some kind of slurry bath?
Messing about
on the rim of a slurry container.
Yeah.
You were sort of asking for it then.
Well, no. I was there out of peer pressure, and then it went badly wrong. What the fucked farm shit? Prematurely born calf, helped raise it, remember feeding it milk, and then it got killed by, according to the vet, a badger, which doesn't make any sense to me. That's fucked, isn't it?
For food or...
Oh, no. It probably... The vet's explanation was that it probably accidentally trod on the badger and then the badger panicked and lashed out.
Do you blame the badger?
No. Okay. I love badgers. I think they're cool.
Yeah.
But even I'm scared of them.
Do you love that specific badger?
I mean, that badger's dead. That happened years ago.
Yeah, I suppose nature just took its course.
Yeah. But, I mean, farmers in general hate badgers because of both. I mean, the example I've just given was bizarre and I still don't believe that vet, but like bovine TV farmers... Set digging, they build their little tunnels under the field. But like a badger, very low centre of gravity, much higher speed than you'd ever imagine. Powerful jaws.
Vicious. Yeah, they're like a living torpedo.
Yeah, they look really nice, but if you and they're kind of scaredy cats. But if one was pissed off at you, if one was coming for you, it'd be an issue.
I love the specific animal grudge, the Moby Dickification of something that you could just get over. Like my nan who thinks there's a specific like cat that comes in, and it's not a specific cat, it's just there are cats. Or like the hedgehog deciding that's the same hedgehog as last time.
It could
like
be
refining animals down into indivials that you can have relationships with.
I think it's wrong to suggest that an animal cannot act on malice.
So you're an advocate of the animal grudge. You're the advocate of a Moby Dick relationship.
I think I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. Of what I like is the idea that an animal has a grudge against you. I like the idea that a beast of the natural world has taken against a human and is like maliciously shitting in their garden.
I just don't think it can. I think there's something that you're triggering in the animal, and you need to work out what that is and change it. You need to just keep changing things about yourself. It could just be you've got a lump of meat somehow stitched into the lining of your jacket, and the moment that goes out, this like terrapin or whatever that's going for you just leaves you alone.
You know, we all like to anthropomorphize the beasts, right?
Oh, I'll anthropomorphize anything. Oh, I specifically decide that every heron I see is the same heron.
Yeah.
And then I could be like, oh, what's he up to today? Yeah. Oh, he's gone over here, he's gone over there, he's doing this today. Oh, what a busy life. Storybookification of what is, in fact, nihilistic wilderness.
The farmers don't Moby Dick the animals, they just do hate them. Like if a farmer turns against badgers, they hate all badgers. If a farmer turns against foxes, they hate all foxes. They hate rabbits. Rabbits are digging. The rabbits eat your veggies. Farmers, if you're vegetarian, I mean I'm vegetarian, but if you're vegetarian and you think that your vegetables are bloodless, no, rabbits are being slaughtered to maintain your veggies. Because if they weren't, the rabbits would be eating your veggies instead of you, and then digging tunnels through the irrigation system and rapidly multiplying.
So it's probably just as vegetarian to eat the rabbits.
Yeah. Flawless logic. But then the animals, the farmers have a fucking mad as well. Sheep, the blight of the hills. The UK was massively deforested a couple of thousand years ago, and the sheep just maintain that because they'll just, if a sapling just pops up, sheep will go, ooh, delicious.
Yeah, and that maintains deforestation, which the lack of trees causes a lot of problems, especially due to rivers, because a lot of the things that maintains the shape of the river beds and the river sides is actually like roots going through them, holds that shape and stops mud just continually falling into it. So a lot of the flooding that we have experienced and are going to experience are due to the lack of responsibility and legal requirements of farmers to do anything to like maintain arable grazing lands. Like,
you know, the countryside of people's heads is sheep on the hills, but sheep on the hills is still depressingly industrialized. Like the fields are the countryside, but they're not nature.
Yeah, it would be just woods if it was left to its natural state.
Yeah, and then you get the whole rewilding thing, which is we need farmland because we need food. The UK only produces like 60% of its own food. Loads of farmland just isn't arable. That's why sheep are on the hills, because it's very difficult to plough a hill.
Yeah.
Funny, but difficult.
It would be funny to plough a hill.
Yeah.
It'd be funny to see carrots coming off
a
at
laugh.
45 degrees. Yeah, it would be a laugh. I'd be laughing falling down the hill with a plough. breaking my back with a plough in my hand. And they're hedged off the crisscross hedgerows and dry stone walls that denotes like where you can walk and where you can't walk.
Yeah.
I was thinking, because we did an episode recently about transport infrastructure and the ease through which someone who lives in a city environment should or can get from A to B.
Yeah.
But thinking about living in the countryside as a child, one of the defining features of living out where there are farmlands is that you cannot get anywhere, but you can always see like a field, often with nothing happening to it, like left fallow, that is massively blocking off just a big chunk of land that you've got to go around these like tiny routes, navigating, especially when you're like a teenager, you don't drive, actually getting anywhere in the countryside.
Can I give you a life hack?
Just go in the field.
Walk straight across it. There you go.
In the heart of England, rising amidst the verdant Derbyshire landscape, lies Kinderscout, a magnificent windswept plateau. Today, it stands not only as a testament to the raw beauty of nature, but also as a symbol of people's power and resolve, a monument to the spirit of freedom and the right to roam. On a spring day in 1932, over 400 people took part in the Kinderscout mass trespass, organised by the Young Communist League's Manchester division. This wasn't just bad lads looking for somewhere to smash down Kansas Stella. It was a defiant protest against the restrictions that barred public access to vast tracts of private moorland. These beautiful landscapes were largely preserved for the elite, who used them just a few days a year to kill birds for fun. Most of these trespassers were working class people, hardened by long hours in factories or scarred by unemployment, longing for the solace of the open countryside. Communist League flyers read like a call to arms, exhorting fellow comrades to reclaim the fine country at present denied us. They met resistance in the form of gamekeepers hired by the rich landowners to maintain their monopoly on the moorlands. What followed was a brief scuffle, yet it did not dampen the spirit of the protesters. They pressed on, their resolve echoed in the lyrics of socialist anthems like the Red Flag and the Internationale. The protest culminated in the arrest of 6 ramblers, who faced charges of riotous assembly and public order offences, despite trespassing not being a criminal offence. Their punishment was jail time, an injustice that stirred the public consciousness. The Kinderscout trespass was a rallying cry, a potent symbol for the fight for the right to roam freely in the English countryside. The event and its aftermath swayed public opinion, inspiring subsequent protests, and paved the way for the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act of 1949 and the Countryside and Rights of Way Act of 2000, monumental laws that greatly expanded public access to open lands. Thus, the protest at Kinderscout became a significant chapter in the struggle for public rights. It underscored the power of unity, of direct action, and the importance of standing up for our right to land. Echoes of that protest continue to resonate today, a source of inspiration and a reminder of the persistent fight for the right to access and enjoy the wonders of nature. Bird. Sorry, distracted. Trespassing, an act often met with disdain as it challenges established property rights, possesses an untapped potential as a form of activism, transgression, and a means to liberate our common inheritance from the clutches of private ownership. In England, restrictive property laws keep 92% of land and 97% of rivers out of public reach. Throughout history, trespassing has stood as a powerful act of civil disobedience and protest against injustices perpetuated by the ruling class. When activists step onto private property or restricted areas, they not only draw attention to issues such as land inequality, environmental degradation and social injustices, but also force society to confront the inherent contradictions of a system that grants privilege to a few while depriving the majority of their rightful access to resources. From the enclosures of the common lands during the agrarian revolution to contemporary struggles against corporate land grabs, trespassing has consistently been used to disrupt unjust power dynamics, making it an indomitable tool in the hands of those seeking change. Trespassing challenges the deeply ingrained narrative that private ownership is an unquestionable and natural state of affairs. It is an active refusal to acknowledge artificial boundaries as trespassers step onto owned land, exposing the myth of exclusive rights and laying bare the fallacies of an unequal social order. Throughout history, private ownership, rooted in violence, colonisation and enclosure, has enabled the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a select few. Trespassing disrupts this, revealing that land is not inherently owned, but is instead part of our common inheritance belonging to all of us. It is an act of defiance against a system that seeks to confine and control, reminding us that the land is a birthright that cannot and should not be monopolised. The private ownership of land perpetuates social inequality and restricts access to vital resources. Trespassing serves as a powerful tool to challenge this oppressive structure by asserting the rights of the dispossessed and marginalised. It allows communities to reclaim spaces that were historically theirs and highlights the fundamental injustice of privatising what should be held collectively. Trespassing is a call for justice, an assertion that the land should be a source of sustenance and empowerment for us all, not just a means for the privileged few to amass wealth, exert control and shoot birds.
Because a lot of those right-of-way walking routes, some farmers don't give a shit. Some of them aren't even really clear whether it's just a historical route that people have used or whether it's something that's actually like held up by like some ancient, this is a
scroll deep in the bowels of the council library.
Some monk has put in the Doomsday Book that you're allowed to walk here, but you can't bring a dog or something. Yeah. Like, and whether or not that's going to be respected is just based on whether or not someone's going to come out of the shed, run in between several cows and call you a dickhead.
Yeah, but in a voice, in an accent you can't understand. Wielding a gun.
Never had a gun wielded, although I have found myself in the middle of where people are like shooting grouse and stuff when I was wandering.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. I was walking through some like, can't remember what crop or whatever, but a tall crop, and a bunch of pheasants and grouse came out. I'm like, that's not a natural amount. And then it had some like buckshot. That's not a natural amount. That's not a natural amount. Sometimes it's and then you'd hear some buckshot in the woods, and I'm like, I'm just going back. I know where the nearest A road is, and they're not going to do it near there, so I'm off. In the same patch, I once nearly got hit by a deer, and that was quite spooky because I was walking the dog, and it must have spooked something. And because I was walking through or near very tall crops, neither of us could see each other until the collision was almost about to happen.
Fucking hell. I like that bit at the edge of, so going to an A road, on the edge of motorways where there's like a mini rewilded area, but it's a horrific rewilded area because it's like, oh my God, it's a little utopia where there's nothing's being farmed and there's just a 2 metre wide little mini forest. However, there's also vehicles hurtling along at 70 miles an hour that will just smash my life away.
Well, this is what I always found so grim, right? I used to work at a pub that was in the other village down, and I had to walk on a bit of absolute scrappy nothing next to a big dual carriageway. So I'm like, that's my only way to get from A to B. And alongside it is just empty fields. And these I couldn't get through. These would be adequately fenced off. I think in the city, you imagine the countryside as emptiness because it looks empty. But when you're there, you're like, well, no, everything's sort of full. There's nowhere to build anything new. There's nowhere to do anything new. A lot of this is land. And a lot of it seems visibly just to be owned because it's owned. A lot of it's not having anything done with it. It's just someone's.
Yeah. So there's like land. There's the depressing stuff of like all this enclosure for production, for capital. Like when you're looking out at fields crisscrossed with hedges and walls, it's still industry. It's just agricultural industry. It's still, business. It's like when you're in the countryside, like, oh, I'm escaping from the all this business stuff. No, you're still in it. But
you're 100%. If anything, it's more hidden because you don't have these like big signage saying this is owned by this LLC or such and such properties. You just have a hedge,
Yeah, and then some of it isn't, like you say, isn't even productive. It's just where someone goes to shoot grouse every now and then. And it's fucked as well because the countryside is like such a resource for like being outside is nice, right? Being outside is like demonstrably good for your mental health. Being in nature alleviates stress, anxiety, depression. It is nice. It is pleasant. It can stimulate creativity. And it is a thing we are denied.
Yeah, and it almost, like a lot of the time in the countryside, you can feel like you're in a nature zoo where you can see, you are still walking on tarmac and concrete. You can see nature, but it is private. It owns someone else and you would be trespassing. Mm-hmm. I don't think any teenager who's grown up in the countryside has not trespassed because it's impossible to do anything or get anywhere without doing something that is technically
knowingly or
trespass.
Not knowingly. Yeah.
A lot of this land, I remember the Pig District.
Pig District?
The Pig District.
Ah, sorry.
I wouldn't mind the Pig District.
Like the Pig. Yeah. I asked that with like, is that something that I don't know about?
Although that sounds more like a residential area. Go down to the pig district. No, they don't like humans down there.
A retirement centre for the police.
Oh, that would be good. Then we could just wall it in.
Don't enter the hoglands.
They can deal with it themselves.
Yeah.
They're their own society. And one of the big issues the UK has is actually not only like property ownership isn't like displayed anywhere. You can't even find out who owns a lot of this land.
No.
We are possibly one of the worst countries for transparency in land ownership.
Yeah.
Because all of these things go back, like, a lot of the land ownership goes back bloodlines and aristocracy.
That's what I was saying, mysterious scrolls again.
This goes 100% mysterious scrolls. There was actually a commission that tried to look into this in the 70s. The Labour government set up something called the Royal Commission of like Income and Inequality. And they said we couldn't really complete this task entirely because there's such a paucity of information on who owns land.
Yeah.
That we couldn't really get to the bottom of it. And then Thatcher came in and went, just don't bother doing anything. This entire commission is scrapped. And then more recently, I think it was Kwasi Kwarteng tried to look into, because obviously Russian oligarchs shadow owning big properties in London City is now politically much more undesirable than it once was. But then when it comes to being like, okay, so we're going to look into the legality of some of this ownership, how the loopholes upon loopholes of who owns things is just completely occludes and obfuscates where the money's going from, who actually holds the deed to these things.
Well, some of it goes back to as early as like initial enclosure from the 1500s and 1600s, where, some of it they managed to do through what at the time were legal means, but it was still, class robbery. But on the other hand, some of it was just the local lord going, this is mine now. The farmers I knew as a kid, they were renting their farms. They didn't own them. They were like tenant farmers, which always seemed bonkers of like, your labour and the labour of everyone here is like making this land productive. You're like barely doing okay because the supermarkets are fucking you over with price gouging, or sometimes literally at a loss with like dairy. And then you don't own this. This isn't yours. This is genuinely a lord. There's a guy called Lord Langford who owns loads of land in North Wales. Yeah,
lords still owning huge amounts of land. Yeah, is like every countryside community knows the estate of the local lord that still owns this, that, and this, that. I think the stat is like half of England is owned by 1% of the population. Yeah. Like the land ownership inequality is like ancient.
And then all those lords will be slowly selling it to Vanguard and BlackRock.
Because land has this like built-in value.
Yeah.
Land as like a commodity, it doesn't really fluctuate hugely because everyone always massively wants it. And if you're in a country where all the land is owned,
God's not making any more of it.
Exactly, right? So you can ransom it off. There have been times where like councils and stuff are trying to get some land to build housing, and suddenly the valuation they're being given by the landowners is like 200 to 300 times more. So you can just absolutely ransom it off. And that means like the housing crisis is absolutely beholden to this, because we need to build houses on existing land that is undeveloped. And it's just owned by like speculators who just buy up land for this purpose of gouging, or just old aristocracy who just can also gouge it because they're often in cahoots with the speculators who now run like these companies just for holding your land and assets and gouging them. So that's why, like, even though we've got a massive housing crisis, you're seeing people build like luxury flats, high-end flats. Buildings are still being made for people to live in, but only on like the highest income brackets, because the investment is so high. The return has to be high because the price of land is constantly maintained at a ludicrous valuation.
Well, there's also the people who live in the countryside who are like, I don't want a development by me. That's my field I like to look at.
Yeah, the village I lived in had an ongoing, quite huge Facebook petition against a new housing development, even though a lot of those petitions were the people who lived in the old housing development that was also quite new. And they were like, we're the last ones. We're the last generation to come here.
Then pull the ladder up.
I need to get here before I pull the ladder up, otherwise I won't get there. I found out, I'm always obsessed by what the Crown Estate owns, like the biggest land ownership bloodline.
Yeah.
It's not that much agricultural land. They own about, they own 0.5%. The royal family owns over half of the foreshore in the UK.
What?
There's always a 50% chance when you're on the beach that belongs to the king. And that also means all the oil platforms and often a lot of the wind farms you see. That's Crown Estate stuff.
Nationalise it.
And then I went into reading about land tax. Land tax is actually quite interesting. As a policy that you just tax land at a flat rate based on how much land you own, it's got this kind of bipartisan appeal. Adam Smith liked it. Winston Churchill was in favour, and Jeremy Corbyn. It's like a strange... Because the idea is that it's incredibly simple, right? How much land do you own? I'm going to tax you based on that. But because land doesn't lose its value, right, you're not going to get people being like, oh, I don't care about land then, and moving into other sectors. Every sector requires land.
Yes.
So it's considered this kind of perfect tax in this macroeconomic sense, because you're not going to dissuade people off of land by taxing it. People are always going to want land. And that's why you've got people in favour. And also, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell are in favour because it is considered this progressive taxation, because people without land aren't taxed at all.
Yeah. And as you said before, did you say 50% of the land's owned by 1%?
1%. Yeah.
Well, now I'm just thinking of a man putting his hand up in Question Time and going, well, everyone's got 100 acres. That's nothing.
Yeah, we've all got a few acres. I'm working class and I own 100 acre woods. I'm working class and so are my tenants. But the thing that sends your mind boiling is when you realise what the UK has an alternative to land tax. Because the closest thing the UK has is council tax. And so that means if you own land, you can pop someone in that land and then they pay the tax on it. We are, if you're renting, you're paying the tax for the land for your landlord.
Yeah. As
opposed to them paying tax because they own land.
It's almost as if the entire economy is geared towards rinsing the working class rather than the owning class.
It does seem that way.
I'm really worried that might be the case.
But my issue with that would be that wouldn't be very fair.
Property rights enforced on the land itself is fucked. But the way that that kind of enclosure goes through farming across the world, big farmers who exploit cheap, often migrant labour in the UK, hugely exploitative. How can they exploit that labour? Because they own and control the land. Internationally, the supermarkets exploit farmers and farm labourers for cash crops, your tea, your rice, your coffee, oranges, stuff that isn't being grown in the UK. Often a 10x markup is what you're paying at the supermarket and to what the farmer who's actually made the crop is getting for it. Down to copyrighting and owning the property of a crop. Like Monsanto owns, has taken farmers to court for their crops being found growing in their land. Pollen is moved by insects and, the wind can move things. So the fact that someone's particular GMO crop is growing on your land and then you're being taken to court for breach of copyright.
Yeah.
So it's not...
A crow did a shit in my field and now I'm some sort of seed pirate?
Well, yeah, it's fucked up. And then Monsanto are like true hardcore evil. Terminator crops is like a type of crop they designed where you'd have to buy it from them every season because be able to replicate itself. So basically you can plant it, it grows a crop, and then you won't be able to get new seed out of it.
Yeah, they're trying to turn farming into the same subscription model as like the Adobe suite.
Yeah. Well, Adobe in many ways is copying Monsanto. Monsanto's like ahead of the curve, right? So much of this stuff, like if you think of it, primitive accumulation and just like rentier behavior, that often comes from land and farms, and then the rest of the economy follows it. Like agriculture is where that, if we think of the early development of capitalism, how did it develop? Well, it developed through the slave trade and the plantation and taking land from Native Americans and then turning it into plantations and then using slave labor on it so your ownership of the land and your ownership of the people generated profit, and then imposing that same logic through enclosure in Europe to go, okay, let's make this more like a plantation. Let's get rid of any kind of communal peasant farming and strip farming and make it about monocultures and hedged off enclosed farms. The genesis of capitalism came about through those changes to agriculture. So they're often innovators, and Monsanto continues to do it. Like, what other fuck stuff have they done? They make herbicide resistant crops so that you can spray their poisonous carcinogenic shit on the field and it'll kill the quote unquote weeds. but their crops will remain. Just fucking with stuff. Like, I'm not someone who's like, oh, because I appreciate that, you want to get the best yield possible and you can feed more people. So I'm not someone who's like, everything should be organic, because if you can genetically modify things to get more food to feed more people, that's good. But you can do that in a not transparently evil way.
And also a lot of the sustainability claims made by a lot of monocrop farming are a bit bogus. I know the big thing that people are learning about now en masse, especially with the amount of wildfires that people are getting. I know, like, New York just turned blood red for the Diablo 4 launch. But the whole cut down a tree, plant a tree thing?
Yes.
But like the trees that they plant are just this monocrop of trees where it's just these single trees all like 2 meters apart. That's not a replacement for a forest.
No,
it doesn't do as much. You don't have trees at different heights and etc. So if fire tears through that, it tears through it. It's built to burn.
Well, also, you need biodiversity because crops, certain crops will pair with each other and help each other grow and protect each other. But like, and again, that monoculture comes from private land ownership. Mm-hmm. and then next stage of copyrighted crops that you get on your subscription model, enforced through the courts.
And there's just a nakedness to being in the countryside, because I think anyone who's only exclusively live in a city, who's got this kind of pastoral vision of what it's like to be out there, or they specifically go to kind of tourist trapped, like, nice towns that still have like old brick pubs with roaring fires. The real countryside feels a lot more closed off and a lot more privatized than the city can, because the city still will all have these remnants of the socialism that existed in the beginnings of industrialization. So there will be like these specific town halls and there will like be these specific libraries and stuff, but especially rural countryside poverty in highly privatized agricultural land ownership spaces are like way more dystopian than any kind of cyberpunk dystopia. So with hedgerow dystopia, countrypunk is here.
Yeah.
I'm going to body modify myself a hedgerow into my arm.
Monsanto's installed a tractor wheel between my legs.
I can sort of inspect a gadget, one of my fingers open, and it's a root system, so I can hack into a monocrop.
Mandatory Redistribution Party was created and produced by Sean Morley and Jack Lewis Evans. Our title theme was created by Ella G. Thank you for listening to Mando's, and very special thanks to those of you who support our work by sharing this episode on social media or supporting us at patreon.com/mandatory redistribution party, where you can harvest a bumper crop of bonus content. Till next time, much love and Godspeed, friends.